morning, everybody. Welcome to the Graduation Equity Webinar Series. I'm Kathy Anderson. I'm an Assistant Director of Early Warning Systems. And today we are going to talk about designing accessible graduation pathways for all students. This webinar is being recorded. It should be available in the next couple of days on YouTube. We do have closed captions, and thank you to our American Sign Language interpreters for being here today. The PowerPoint we'll share with you in the chat, but you can also get it on our webpage. It's posted right now, so you can get that as well. This webinar is brought to you through the Office of Student Engagement and Supports at OSPI. We believe all students prepared for post-secondary pathways, careers, and civic engagement. I feel really lucky to live here. Fall in the Pacific Northwest is so beautiful, and I can already see the leaves turning and the school starting. It definitely is feeling like a return to the routine. And in my life, I mostly travel the traditional lands of the Squaxin Islands, Coast Salish, the Cowlitz, and the Nisqually tribes. Just a second for spelling. Feel free to share the traditional lands where you all are coming from on the chat as well. And I'd just like to acknowledge the Indigenous people who have stewarded this land since time immemorial and who still live here today. Thank you and welcome. Tribal consultation is a really great way to get to know your local tribes and begin relationships that benefit students, families. And if you want to learn more about it, we can help you, so let us know. Today's webinar, we're focusing on access to graduation and differentiation to support all students, because we know the choices made about pathways and what counts as credits can be a barrier. Our system shouldn't be what stands in the way of student finding success, and Washington is doing some really great work in forging ahead with flexible pathway options that make graduation more accessible to more students. So we want you to know about it. Today we chose several objectives. We want you to be able to understand a broad overview of college and career pathway options in Washington. And we want you to get an introduction to credit flexibility and course equivalencies. Learn some promising practices for inclusion in CTE classrooms. And scheduling transcription flexibility. We want you to be able to learn some strategies and best practices, and we will have some resources to help you. Throughout the webinar, we appreciate your questions. We want them in the Q&A so we can track them carefully. And you can upvote questions that you want answered the most. So as you see them in there and you want an answer to, add your thumbs up to those too. We're joined today by some awesome presenters. We have Maria Muto. She is our Secondary Counseling Program Supervisor at OSPI. And we also have Alexandra Toney. She's the Special Education Program Supervisor. And Stanley Weaver, who's our CTE Program Supervisor. And usually we have a panel. We're kind of putting our panel first today, so that's our panel. They're each going to talk about their own specialties. And then they've also brought along with them Candace Conroy, who is the Director of K-12 Curriculum and Instruction at AGC Education Foundation. Welcome. We are so glad to have all of you here with us. Each of these people has so much expertise and are a great resource if you want to learn more. We are going to launch a poll. There we go. And we're just wondering what your role is, what grade band that you work with the most, and how familiar you are with today. Get those for a second, and let's go and check. So I see members from Yakima and Kalamazoo. like our interpreter. All right, look at the poll. We have quite a few school counselors here, as well as school psychologists, community liaison. We have a handful of administrators and district folks as well, and just a few teachers out there. Thanks for making time. There's some middle and high school folks, and a lot of people who are kind of in the both realm. And people are somewhat familiar with this topic, and there's a good probably third who are very familiar with this topic. So as y'all have questions and want us to get more specific, instead of raising your hands, if you can write stuff in Q&A, that would be great. I'm going to share these results back in case you want to take a look at them, and we're going to move on. So we are going to go to Maria first. Welcome, Maria.
Good morning, and thank you, Keffy. I'm happy to join today and excited for the folks that are lined up to talk to you all about these really important topics and just exciting topics as well. So I forgot that I have control of the slides. I'm going to go over graduation certificate options in Washington State and what those requirements are to earn those graduation or the diplomas. So first I want to start with, whoops, went too far. There is one diploma in Washington State and one set of requirements to earn that one diploma. I will go into more detail about what those requirements are in just a moment here. This may be a change from the information that folks have heard about. I hear a lot about different diplomas and different institutions offering different types of diplomas and different diplomas for students with IEPs. And so as I, along with the other panelists, speak about graduation today, I want to plant the seed and have everyone keep in mind that we are speaking about supporting students in making progress toward this one diploma for Washington State students. For those who may remember, the Certificate of Individual Achievement, or the CIA, that was previously awarded to students who were served with IEPs, that certificate is no longer available. That is due to this WAC change that went into effect in 2020. So before that, IEP teams could come together and decide that they were going to waive or replace some of the credit requirements for their students, but that is no longer an option. They cannot replace any of those credits with other courses or waive them for students with IEPs. What is allowed in the WAC are substitutions with comparable content course work, which my colleague Alexandra will be telling you more about. Super excited for her to share that with you. While there is only that one diploma in Washington State, we do want folks to walk away today learning about the flexibility that has been built into the systems to support students meeting those requirements and making them work for them. And on the other side of it, for school systems to support students in pursuing what I put these curvy arrows in there because they might be considered the less traditional, straight pathways to graduation. That might be, oh, you take this one set of classes, you take this one test, and that is the one path that students can perceive that they have and must squeeze themselves into meeting to get their diploma, and really shifts us to thinking, how can we flex our systems to shape themselves to support those students and help them take ownership for their own educational journeys instead of squeezing themselves into the systems as they exist now. So what are these graduation requirements? They can be broken down into these three basic groups for what students need to complete in high school. I will acknowledge that I did not include the Washington State history requirement on here, just because that's generally completed in middle school for Washington students. But those three components are the high school and beyond plan, the graduation pathway, and the 24 credits. And those are all components that are required and usually completed in high school to earn that diploma in our state. We're going to start with the high school and beyond plan. So I know I may have just, I think I telepathically heard a groan across the entire state, but hear me out. I love the high school and beyond plan for the essence of its intentions and the data it can provide us as educators to support our students. The high school and beyond plan is intended to help our students answer these three questions. Who am I? Who can or what can I become? And how do I become that? I will admit that I am in education because my mom was in education, my dad was in education, uh, my husband's in education, my sister's in education, my brother-in-law. You get the idea. Obviously, you can tell what I was exposed to, and it's really thinking, what are we exposing kids to? Do they know how they can get to be that, and what steps it takes to get there? So knowing more about themselves in the high school and beyond plan and what sorts of interests create that spark in them, uh, that's what we want students to refer to and have their families be able to refer to, and any of their community outside of school, to understand what the best choices are for them as they're working their way through high school, where there's way more opportunities to guide their education than they've ever had before. There can be a lot of options when they get to high school. Uh, this is where the high school and beyond plan can really help students and families and the people providing them with guidance help make these choices. Uh, do they take a world language or should they flex those credits? What would help them meet their goal more? AP biology or a science course through a running start at a local college? That in turn also can help school systems and educators know what makes the most sense to offer at their primary schedule. What programs perhaps can be grown that have usually been delegated to, oh, you can't take that till junior or senior year. Uh, what could really be turned into more robust offerings if we knew that that's what students are interested in and that's what the job market is also demanding. And that makes me think, as a school counselor previously myself, what are we having students immediately take into high school? When are we not offering them choices? What schedule are they being handed as ninth graders? And how do we connect more with middle school counselors to think more about how we start those conversations earlier, even though that's traditionally not how our systems have worked? Okay, I'm going to highlight something I just mentioned, those flexible credits. They're called personalized pathways. And I know that this was definitely something that was confusing for me. So I will throw it out there that it's okay if it's confusing to you as well. These are flexible credits. There's three of them, and they're in the graphic we just saw. And I have pulled them out to put them here as well. These three credits are generally defaulted in a student's requirements and schedule to world language, 2 credits, and a second credit of art, because that would ensure that students are on track to meet graduation requirements or admissions requirements, I apologize, for the four-year universities in Washington State and generally in the United States, and not closing off that opportunity for them in case they want to or decide that a four-year college is the route for them. These are not absolutely required to be these credits. They don't have to be 2 world language credits and 1 art credit. If they want to pursue admissions to a four-year college directly after high school, then yes, this is the right way for those to be allotted. But if their plan differs, they're intended to be flexible and personalized to what the student's plans are. So moving on to the last component, graduation pathways, or as I've started to refer to them, because number one, I'm a nerd, and number two, I have 2 young children. I'm calling them power-ups. Think Mario style, Super Mario. So sorry, that's where my brain went. Um, these are the newest component and the most recent changes to graduation requirements in Washington State. Our state has shifted away from that testing requirement where the students had to pass the SBAC or SAT or ACT, or then they had to get a waiver to say that they tried, um, to demonstrate that they have post-secondary preparedness in English language arts and math. I call these power-ups instead of graduation pathways in my own mind, because if we know the direction a student is headed, not the job, not the forever career, the general direction or interest that they have, right? That spark, the corresponding graduation pathway can act as this amazing advantage as they pursue that and those next steps after high school. So let's try an example. A student knows that they want to go to college, but they're not sure if they want to go to a 2-year college or if they want to go to a 4-year college. The SBAC would be a great pathway for them because that can help them place into those math and English classes once they get to whichever one of those they choose. It serves as an advantage. If they want to pursue an apprenticeship, a CTE pathway could serve them the best and provide them with certificates or equip them with those licenses that can skip them ahead while they are still in high school, saving them time, money, effort. Some of the other panelists today will be speaking about how flexibility and opportunity exist within these, and I am so excited for y'all to hear more about that. I love the flexibility that's built in. Something that should be kept in mind is that all of these are equal and should be available to all students. There is no IEP pathway. There is no MLL pathway. It's whatever lines up with what the student wants to do next and best supports those plans. So I'm going to acknowledge that I just talked about pathways, and I used the word pathway to refer to 2 completely different things. Pathways, that's a very popular term in Washington State. Um, we don't get to name these. They're written into the legislation. So, and the rules. Unfortunately, we can't do a name switch very easily. So here is my quick cheat sheet for you. I love having cheat sheets to tell the difference between those pathways. The only pathway that's a requirement for graduation is the graduation pathway. The personalized pathway is a way to support students meeting the credit requirements in a way that makes sense to their educational and personal journey. If you want to learn more about these, you can check out the graduation toolkit and FAQ, and it has a whole section dedicated to the differences between how we use the term pathways in Washington State. What I do want to highlight before moving on to talk about a specific graduation pathway a little more in depth is that the high school and beyond plan and graduation pathway, actually all three of these, they're intended to connect and be aligned. If they're not aligned, the student, the family, the educators, the community, they can't provide the best support to students possible, because this gives us all the data to say, oh, you want to drop this class? Let's go look at your high school and beyond plan. Let's see what you said so that we can move forward with the best information possible. Kefi, am I running over time?
You got maybe 1 minute left, Maria. Thanks.
Okay. I do want to talk about really quickly. There is a video here that highlights I'm not going to run through it now, and folks will be able to watch it on their own time. But the graduation performance-based option is a new one. It does differ from other requirements or pathways. It requires a board policy. There's lots of information posted online to learn more. I highly encourage folks to explore how creative you can be with this. Here is an example that I pulled from Hawaii and the Kamehameha schools. And it really connects how this kind of work and project-based learning connects to English and language arts. And as we move through the next few panelists, here's just some questions for consideration when you're thinking about how elementary through high school, you're preparing students to think about their steps afterwards, because all of it comes together in high school, but it's impossible to ask everyone to get all of this exploration and all of this work done in high school. Thanks so much, Kefi. I apologize for going a bit slow and having a bit too many slides. That's my MO. And I did have a quick poll, if that's still okay, to drop a question in there.
Yeah,
Oh, thanks. I'm just really curious to hear what folks think, which post-secondary pathway it fits aligns most with your students' goals in your area. And then I'm going to drop in a chat a resource for you.
Maria, just out of my own curiosity, I know a lot of students, I hear they want to be influencers. What's the pathway for a kid who's going to be like an influencer?
Oh, I love this game. We played this game in my advisory when I would sub for that. Um, Stump Miss Muto. For someone who wants to be an influencer, I did have a student come and have to tell me what a Twitch streamer was, because they said, Miss Mito, I want to be a Twitch streamer. And I was like, a what? A Twitching? What are we talking about here? um, it's, I would say it depends, but I would say CTE might make the most sense if they need to learn how to edit videos. That's going to be a CTE course. If they need to learn about graphic design to market themselves, accounting, business law. If you're an influencer, you got to know your stuff so you can protect yourself when it comes to these brand deals. And I don't even know what influencers are going to be in 10 years, because who can even predict that at this point? But yeah, there's a lot that students can be funneled in, and it would be helpful beyond just influencing if that doesn't work out for them.
Awesome. Thanks, Maria. I'm seeing lots of CTE options in the chat as well. And yeah, it looks like that's a really popular pathway. And this is interesting about open doors and CTE not being as available for open doors students. Maybe we can get to that in a little bit. Let's go on to Alexandra. Alexandra, you want to tell us a little bit about what this looks like for you?
Hello, hi, I'm Alexandra Tony, and I'm here at the Special Education Department of OSPI to talk a little bit around how we can support all students to succeed, speaking a little bit to those strategies that can support students who have IEPs, but really are flexible and evidence-based strategies that support all students. And so I will slide controls, try this out. Trying again. Okay, so to begin with sort of the content today, I want to start a little bit with the data and the why for the work. And so in this slide here, you see the landscape of students with IEPs in 2022 based on their eligibility status in Washington State. And so that's how they're eligible for an IEP. You can see with the stars, the 3 stars, the most common eligibility categories, which include communication disorders, so that's like stuttering or articulation, health impairment that might look like ADD, and specific learning disability. Together, these make up about 65% of students who have IEPs, over 65%, I'm sorry. And then I also want to draw your attention to intellectual disabilities, which is about right in the middle. So only about 3% of our students who have IEPs are eligible based on an intellectual disability. And so this is helpful just to kind of wrap your head around like who are our students with IEPs and sort of what are their disabilities and also the overall support, right? And so we're going to go to the next slide and talk a little bit about post-school outcomes. And so this is about post-school outcomes for students who have IEP. And so 1 year after a student who has an IEP exits the public school system, whether they drop out or graduate with a diploma, they're contacted and asked what sort of post-secondary options they're connected to. And so the dark blue band in the middle is competitive employment, which is defined as more than 20 hours each week. And that's kind of low. It's averaging between 30 and 40% about. But I really want to focus on the yellow bar at the top, which is like no engagement. So these are students who are graduating from high school to the couch, essentially. And this is our call to action. It's the area that we would want to be the smallest. And imagine what our state-like response would be if for any group of humans, we had an unemployment rate of 27%. So as I said, this is really our call to action. All students, the goal of a high school diploma is for all students to have that meaningful preparation for their next steps after high school. And in the following couple slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about some flexibility for how systems can better support improved post-school outcomes. So that's the yellow bar right there. So on this slide, I want to talk a little bit about what we know from the research for evidence-based predictors for students to be successful. And again, this is for all students. And so you've seen, I can highlight 3 right here. The first 2 that I'm going to talk about are high school diploma status and inclusion in general education. Each one of these really require a student to access and also make meaningful progress in grade level learning standards to earn a diploma. This third one I want to highlight is access to CTE coursework for early and also meaningful career exploration and preparation for their next step after high school. And so Stanley will be talking more about that in a couple slides. I have another slide I just want to do before we jump into the content. And that's to talk on how we can layer academic support. And so sometimes there's a frequent misunderstanding in the field that when a student has an IEP, they may be best served by a special educator or in a special education classroom, and that the content of their IEP takes over what the general education curriculum and content would be. And so we hope that this graphic, as we unpack it, helps to shift away from those ideas, right? And so if you're looking at this graphic, you see the ice cream cone. And we'll start with the first scoop here, which is chocolate, I think. And then really this is general education. And so all students are general education students. And this means that for high school, they earn high school level credit by demonstrating mastery of grade level academic learning standards for the courses they're taking. General education teachers are also the experts for the learning standards for the courses where they are teaching. And then when we unpack this further, you'll see the like vanilla or coconut scoop on top. This is some students are going to have an IEP. And so this is an additional layer of support that goes on top of the first general education scoop that some students have through that IEP. And in this, you can really see that IEP provides an additional layer of academic, behavioral, or functional support. And the purpose of an IEP is really to bridge the gap between where a student is at, so their present level of performance, to those grade level expectations. And so special education instruction through an IEP is additional support that bridges that gap and doesn't take the place of that first scoop of general education ice cream. And a few points just to highlight here. Special educators are experts at differentiating content and providing access to grade level learning standards. They are not necessarily experts in the standards themselves, nor is it feasible to know the standards of all the different academic areas. So I want to highlight that. And then the other thing that I wanted to highlight is if students are in, for example, a resource room or a self-contained classroom working on IEP goals, that's not going to earn high school core content credit unless it also aligns with the grade level learning standards for that area. So as an example, to kind of like put that into context, the only way to earn geometry high school credit is through demonstrating demonstrating mastery of geometry like learning standards. So in the next couple slides, I'm going to provide 3 different examples that can apply to all students about how we can provide flexibility in courses that are still like customized, also like very also keeping the like overall like expectations, but still supporting students to access and like make progress in the standards. So the first example I have here is instructional flexibility within a course, right? So as an example, a teacher could be teaching high school English. And perhaps the standard they're working on is picking out like literary themes from some kind of like literary work. The course can use principles of UDL or universal, so they could use principles of UDL to provide flexibility in how students are engaging with the content and the learning standards of the course. So you see here 3 different examples of the same text. You can have students in the same class, maybe working on the full text version, a condensed text version, perhaps a graphic novel or a theater production. So all different types of like complexity of kind of overall like materials, but they're still working on that grade level standard. So this is one example about how educators can change how students access the content and also demonstrate mastery of it. In the second example, this is systemic flexibility and course selection. So we talked a little bit earlier about comparable content course substitutions. There's a hyperlink on the slide, and I'm hoping our team can maybe drop that into chat as well. And so comparable content course substitutions are still teaching those same learning standards for the courses where they're offering credit for, but you can customize the depth, breadth, and complexity of those standards. And so I'll provide some examples of that in the next slide. But two high-level examples are, so we talked about the only way to get geometry credit is through demonstrating mastery of geometry standards. But we could have students working on those standards in an applied sort of like framework at a different level of depth, breadth, and complexity. So maybe that's construction math, right? Same thing for ELA. Maybe we have the opportunity to teach a like graphic novels course where we're working on those ELA standards, but in a different sort of depth, breadth, and complexity. And some of these courses can be really high interest for students who maybe are interested in Japanese culture or have a career goal of construction. And so these are courses that can be open to all students and provide different ways and high interest ways to engage in those core content areas. So I also want to point out that this like change in depth, breadth, and complexity can happen in any course. It totally doesn't have to be a separate course, but it can be. And as systems, when we're determining how we can best support student progress, the first step is to always look at sound instructional strategies, such as like EL, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, to help the course be accessible to all students. So in this slide, I'm referencing two screenshots from the WAT Access Framework, which is also hyperlinked here. That can be a helpful model to help unpack the how for how we can support access and progress in grade level learning standards at those different levels of depth, breadth, and complexity, right? And so as an example, to kind of unpack this, let's look, so what we're looking at are clips from that WAT AIM Access Point Framework. And if we went through the ELA one together, you can see on the left side is an example of an ELA standard about citing strong textual evidence to support what the text is saying, either explicitly or through inference, right? It also shows the essential elements. It's the essential thing a student should be learning, which is how to develop citations that like demonstrate what the text is saying explicitly or through inference. Then you'll see on the far right side that there's access points to their standards at the more complex level or at the less complex level, right? And so you can have students within a course working on the same standard at those different levels of complexity. And so at the more complex level, it's about identifying details to support an inference from a text, right? And at the less complex level, it's just identifying details of the text. And as we're teaching students, we can support them to deepen the level of complexity to like which students are able to approach the standard. So I hope this is helpful to show one like model for how to support that flexibility and depth, breadth, complexity of the standards, highlighting again that it can be a separate course or it can be flexibility in the same course. That I hope is helpful. So I won't be going too much into this slide, but I did introduce the idea of Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, as a really effective teaching practice for all students. CAST has really great like resources to unpack how to add and expand UDL in teaching practices. And just to highlight, it's really about providing that flexibility so that students have multiple ways of engaging in the content, also like representing what they know in the content. And also the content is shown to students in a variety of ways. So it's highlighting the why of learning, the what of learning, and the how of learning in different ways to support students to engage. So there's a wealth of resources here. CAST has a ton of tools, and I definitely recommend checking them out. And then the last example that I'll briefly highlight today before we kick it over to Stanley to really get in deep with CTE is districts are already doing really great practices around the systemic flexibility through CTE course equivalencies. I often think of these as twofers, right? So CTE courses can count for the CTE course in a CTE course sequence pathway. That's where you need to align CTE courses to make that CTE pathway. But they can also count for core credit area credits, right? And so you can see, for example, let's say a student has a goal in being a vet or a vet tech. They can take an animal science course. That can be the first CTE course to have that early job exploration and experience, count for that first CTE course, but it also counts for a science credit for the area of biology. And so it kind of can count for two, provide your early career exploration and free up schedule space for other courses to explore more things. So this is another example about how systems are already providing that great flexibility to engage students and support students in their content and course selection. So in summary, there are lots of ways that we can provide flexible ways for students to learn. And this flexibility increases opportunities for students to engage in like rigorous and high interest content. It increases students' interest and also participation in the content. And it totally doesn't need to be a separate course, nor is it a strategy to create an easier course. It's also a really important part of inclusionary practices. So I hope this was helpful content as we connect to our next.
Yeah, let's go to Stanley.
Good morning. So excited to be here with you all today. So I am going to skip the poll because I want to dive straight into a little bit of a short story. So I'm here to tell you about the CT graduation pathway, but also as a former CT student myself, I have walked the walk of a CT graduation pathway. As a former CT student, I attended a high school that did not have my desired passion. So all on my own, I decided to locate a high school in my district that did have a culinary arts program that I actually had to take two city buses to attend because I was not zoned for that school. This was due to the fact that Charlotte, North Carolina did not have something like a high school and beyond plan to help direct students in the pathway that they chose. With having that opportunity to put myself at a high school that did have my desired pathway, I was able to complete 4 CTE credits in culinary arts, complete a Serve Safe Manager certification before leaving high school, dual credit opportunities through the International Baccalaureate program, and also be a 2-time CTSO FCCLA national competitor. These are the opportunities that the CT graduation pathway, in conjunction with the high school and beyond plan, can open doors for students in Washington State. So I'm here to share with you what are those requirements. The CT sequence graduation pathway involves students completing 2 credits of CTE courses that are within a rigorous progression. It does need to lead to a dual credit opportunity or to an industry recognized credential. The important thing to remember in regards to this pathway is that the dual credit and industry recognized credential is a lead to and not an obtain. The only time the language of obtaining a credential is used is when you're referring to Perkins funding. So there's a very clear difference there. In conjunction with the sequence, there's also 2 other opportunities that would classify as a CTE graduation pathway. The first being the completion of a Core Plus program, and also completing vocational running start classes as well. one too far. Now, we also understand that as our economy is changing, the industry is changing, and a lot of our pathways for students are not as clear as they used to be. There is a lot of integration and cross-connecting with pathways as we move forward in our society. So in that regard, the CTE local graduation pathway requirements were also created. This is where students can still take 2 credits in CTE, but they also have the ability to take them outside of the same program area. So for example, if a student would like to go into agricultural science, but also find that IT is a big component of the pathway trajectory that they would like to go into, they can do a combination of agriculture and business and marketing classes to build a local graduation pathway. A local graduation pathway does have to be approved by the Office of OSPI, and it does still need to include the requirements of leading to an industry recognized credential or a dual credit opportunity. The other thing that is worth noting with a local graduation pathway application is that they're all submitted through EDS and do come directly to myself for approval. And the last requirement that we look for is a clear occupational alignment with the student's year after high school in mind. One of the amazing resources that we have on our CTE webpage is a list of already approved local pathways across the state. These are all previous applications that have been submitted based on a combination of CTE courses that have been deemed rigorous, have a clear occupational alignment, and lead to a dual credit or industry recognized credential. Currently, there are over 1,600 approved local CTE pathways in our database. And I've also provided the link on this slide as well for you to be able to locate that list. The list is updated every month, so that way you are always up to date on what new local pathways are approved across the state. Any local approved pathway can be adopted by another district. You do not have to follow the same process for an initial approval, but you do have to report to OSPI that you are adopting an already approved local pathway. The process for that is also in EDS, and instead of providing a new submission, you would click that you're providing a used submission. So, like I stated before, the High School and Beyond plan really helps focus a student's attention on their goal in mind for that year after high school. The High School and Beyond plan is the exact thing that I wish that I had as a student. So instead of searching and looking on my own for which credits I need, what certification would best meet my pathway, what dual credit opportunities would best fit my needs, the High School and Beyond plan would help map that out for students. So all of those tools, whether you are exploring careers, looking at what equivalency options are available, all of that information will be possible through the new High School and Beyond platform. So I also mentioned equivalencies. Equivalencies is also something that is a great thing to track within the High School and Beyond plan. And equivalency allows for a student to gain a core subject credit within a career and technical education course. There are both statewide course equivalencies and local equivalencies. Statewide course equivalencies are available throughout the state and are transferable from district to district. Local equivalencies are developed and maintained at the local level and do not transfer from district to district unless the district adopts the local equivalency by the previous district. All statewide equivalencies are located on the OSPI website, and all local equivalencies would be held at the district level. Now, when we're looking at equivalency credit and how that is displayed on a student's transcript, it is very important to make sure that students and teachers understand that equivalency credit can be divided based on the student's preference or what is in the best situation for their graduation requirements. An equivalency credit can be split between the CTE and equivalency credit, or it can also be put towards in full to CTE or the equivalency credit. So for example, using the agriculture and business and marketing example from before, if a student takes an agriculture course that also has a science equivalency, and it is equivalent to 180 hours, which would be 1 full credit, a student can decide to split that credit and have half, 0.5, go towards CTE and 0.5 go towards science. Or they also could do the full credit towards science if that's what they need for their graduation requirement.
Check for questions in the audience. Jocelyn, do you have questions lined up?
Yes, there is one question. Offering occupational studies courses are our current practice, but we are small and do not have any CTE certificated staff. Does the CTE pathway require that courses be taught or have a CTE certificated staff member, or can those be career aligned or occupational studies that help meet the pathway requirement?
Yeah, so that is a great question. As of right now, to my understanding, in order for a course to be counted towards the CTE graduation pathway, it does need to be registered as a CTE course. So of course, that goes through the course approval and EDS. For CTE, there is the availability for online classes to be CTE courses as well. But the main thing is making sure that the course that the student is taking to be in their graduation pathway is a CTE course on record that your school district is approved to have and teach.
Stanley, there's another question. Do any pre-apprenticeships count towards a CTE pathway?
So that would fall in the realm of work site learning. So work-based learning is in the classroom. Work site learning would be at a separate location outside of the walls of the school. Work site learning credit can be awarded to a student for graduation requirements. In regards to a CTE pathway, I would have to get back to you on that clarification. If you want to email me that question, I can follow up.
There's a general question for folks. What happens to students who move from one district to another district?
Yeah, so with credit transfer from district to district with CTE, it's really a conversation between both districts on what credits will transfer. And that is because we are a local controlled state. The same thing in regards to if you have a transfer student outside of the state or even outside of the country. The two districts would need to have a conversation on what credits will transfer based on the course descriptions and what the new district offers.
That when you say online, where and how can they take those?
So you would want to submit that course through course approval for CTE, and your respective program area supervisor would be able to answer that question for you. It is a little bit of a case-by-case scenario. So connecting with the CTE program supervisor that aligns to that course in our office would be the best point of contact.
How long is the approval process? Is there support or guidelines for the process for approval?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the last part of that question? Is it the question in regards to an equivalency approval or graduation pathway approval?
It just asked, the question was, how long is the approval process? Is there support or guidelines for the process?
Yeah. So for the only approval that happens for on our end at OSPI is for a local graduation pathway. If you are doing a CTE graduation sequence, it does not require any approval from the OSPI office. And that is because the sequence of courses are within the same program area. A local pathway are courses that are outside of the same program area. The WAC does stipulate that OSPI has 45 days to respond to an application. It is always my goal to respond and provide the potential for an approval as quickly as possible.
One more question. Pottery is a CTE class in high school, but is considered only an art class at the local community college. How can we get CTE credit for classes like that at a college level?
Can you repeat that one more time?
For example, pottery is a CTE class in high school, but it is considered only an art class at the local community college. How can we get CTE credit for classes like that at the college level?
So that would take a articulation agreement between the school and the college. If you're trying to get the credit at the college level, that's a little bit different than an equivalency. If you are looking to have an art equivalency within your ceramics class that a student is taking at the high school level, that can be done locally, and that would go through course approval in EDS, or there's always the option of presenting that as an idea for a statewide equivalency that also comes to my office, where OSPI can work with you on developing a statewide equivalency for that particular course.
All right, I'm seeing a lot of questions in the Q&A, and that's great. And Stanley, I think I'm going to ask you to type some in if you can answer them that way. And we're going to let Candace share for a little bit about an example from core construction. And so, Candace, yeah, you're up.
Great, thank you. Okay, so again, my name is Candace Conroy. I am with the AGC Education Foundation. And Stanley talked you through a variety of graduation pathways that are available to students in Washington, one of which he mentioned is Core Plus Construction. So let me pop up through these slides. So I want to give you an overview of how our program of study works, and then most importantly, talk to you about how we've incorporated universal design for learning into all of our instructional materials and resources. So a little bit about Core Plus Construction. Core Plus Construction is a CTE program of study. So I loved seeing how many folks were interested in the CTE graduation pathway. We're a CTE program of study that's designed to support students and prepare them for high demand, high wage jobs in the construction industry. And really, our program is made up of two key components. So first and foremost, we are introducing students to construction careers, right? Students are learning these real world skills through hands-on project-based learning. So at the heart of our program, we are a CTE course, preparing students for whatever their next steps might be, right? Whether it's entry-level positions, apprenticeships, post-secondary certificates, or college degrees. The second piece that makes Core Plus what it is, and it's really what sets us apart from any other construction curriculum out there, is our program offers credit equivalencies. So students have the opportunity to earn that third year math, English, or science credit in addition to that CTE credit. And we do this through contextualized learning, right? So it's applied English, applied math, applied science. So Core Plus Construction, two main things. We're introducing students to construction careers, and our program of study has frameworks that align to those credit equivalencies. So before we get into how we're incorporating universal design for learning, I want to take a step back and talk about the development of Core Plus, how we came to be and how we got to this point. So Core Plus Construction, our frameworks, the instructional materials, our industry recognized certificate, we call that the student certificate. All of this has been developed and fully funded by our team here at the AGC Education Foundation, so the Associated General Contractors Education Foundation. Really, this is a gift from our industry to the state of Washington. And so therefore, any teacher or program, K through 12, private, public, tribal compact, can access all of these resources, frameworks, and materials at no cost. And our team at the Ed Foundation also provides schools with professional development. So when we went to develop CPC content, it was really important to us to obviously have industry support. So Core Plus Construction is supported by industry across the state of Washington. We're recognized by Labor and Industries as foundational content for construction apprenticeship preparation programs. And this is across all sectors of the industry. So when we think about, when it came to building out these resources and lesson plans for teachers, we were really eager to incorporate universal design for learning and differentiation ideas throughout all of our content because we want to meet the needs of all students, right? The industry has a space for everyone. We need students of all skills, abilities, and interests. And we really wanted to ensure that our content meets every learner's need. The other thing to be mindful of too is that, of course, the backbone of construction is our skilled trades. But that being said, there's a space for everyone. We need marketing, accounting, communications, health and safety, finance. I mean, you name it. The range of careers that are available to our graduates are large. And so we want to be sure that we are promoting careers and meeting the needs of all learners so that we get in front of as many students as possible and support their goals. Okay, so we really revamped a lot of our resources and curriculum this past year. To give you a sense of how Core Plus Construction works, a little more context, we are implemented in over 90 school districts across the state of Washington. We're really proud of our teachers, and that's districts, not just schools, right? So more schools, and 12 skills centers. And so the implementation models vary, right? As they would with any curriculum. This is based on, of course, student population. That's just good teaching, right? Differentiating to meet the needs of your learner. Also, we're in a unique space in the CTE world and in the shop that folks have different materials in a different shop setup. The aligning piece that is what's consistent in Core Plus, of course, is our frameworks that lead to those credit equivalencies. And then we're providing all of the same materials and resources, and students have the opportunity, or teachers have the opportunity to utilize those how they see fit. When we went to revamp all of these lesson plans this past year, because we really decided to invest some time and energy into incorporating universal design for learning, we decided that it was important to make sure that regardless of our teacher's background, they would be able to pick up this lesson plan and feel really supported with it. Because in the CTE space, we have instructors with an incredible depth of knowledge and expertise coming from industry. We also have instructors with expertise in the education space, right? And teaching experience. Sometimes it's both, but not always. So how do we create lesson plans that we're really supporting our teachers with how they can differentiate for their students? So providing this training was crucial. And because our new lesson plans are so robust, we had a conversation as a team about, okay, how are we talking about our learners, right? And shifting away from language like struggling learners to things like to provide more flexibility, to increase engagement, because this is really just best practices for all of our students. We also have subsections within our content that talks about, how you can modify for students with more significant learning needs. Again, shifting away from that language of struggling learners to an inclusive classroom. All right, so my slide is being a little slow here, but thinking about best practices, Alexandra talked through those, and CTE space is no different, right? There's an opportunity to differentiate in every single classroom. Student assessment is, of course, what drives that best practice. We have assessments in all of our resources and materials, along with ways to differentiate and modify those, right? Maybe it's a verbal assessment versus a written one. The thing that I really want to highlight here is that we are providing scaffolding and differentiation without compromising rigor. So I think sometimes we hear modifications and think that we're compromising the content, and that's not what's happening in Core Plus construction. So what we've decided to do is add differentiation tips embedded after every single activity. I know we've got majority of educators on this call, so the format of our lesson plans will be very familiar to you. It's the I do, we do, you do, right? The teacher models this, the class participates together, and then students show what they know. And after each and every one of those activities are ways that educators can differentiate. Great example of this is note-taking. So this is something that likely happens in every classroom. You might start with a blank sheet of paper, the teacher gives their lecture, and students take notes. Well, what about for students that need more structure than that? So we created guided notes within every unit and oftentimes lesson plans to align with the slide deck and the teacher presentation. And this is essentially a fill in the blank document for students to follow along with their instructor. A third layer of instruction and kind of support and scaffolding for that would be giving the answer key to students and having them highlight. So I want to go back to this idea of we're not editing the curriculum itself, right? The educator's presentation stays the same, the goals are the same, but how we get there with students and what roadblocks we remove to make sure it's accessible to everyone is what's really important here. So let's take a look at some of our lesson plans and how this actually looks, a snapshot into it. So as I mentioned, we've got comprehensive lesson plans. After the majority of our activities where applicable is what we call a differentiation tip. So for example, the activity here is read and summarize a job hazard analysis form, JHA. Huge in our industry. This is important. You need to know how to do this. So here's an example of that applied English. Right? This is industry standard, reading and summarizing a JHA form, preparing kids for industry, but there's their English. There's where we're practicing reading that content, summarizing it, writing about it. Now let's think about this activity and how a teacher might differentiate it. So teachers can provide flexibility, there's that language again, by providing the sample with the least text. So we've provided in our resources for teachers a range of JHA forms to pick from. The JHA ladder form happens to be the least text. Why would we do that? Well, let's think about the end goal. The end goal here is that students can summarize the JHA form, and we're removing extra text that might be overwhelming for students that the literacy component is adding a roadblock to getting there. We could scaffold up. We'll start with that JHA form on ladders and then work their way up, but providing things like prompts, and then starting with a JHA form that's less text is a way to differentiate and modify. Again, incorporating in that UDL, great best practice for everyone. Two other examples, and I should have mentioned, this comes from our safety lesson, or our safety unit. It's a lesson on PPE, so personal protective equipment. The two other examples that we have here, we just cherry picked these from the lesson plan, but there's tons of tips throughout. The other is that the instructor presentation on PPE. So to increase engagement, right? Having instructors ask students which PPE they think would be necessary. So rather than providing that straightforward lecture, let's engage our kids and hold up choices of PPE and think about which one might fit, prompt those questions, grab those visuals. We've got visuals for every unit too. At the end of this lesson, students give a presentation on how to select PPE. How do we differentiate that? Well, this is a pretty open-ended task, right? Pick an activity in the shop, present to your peers on the PPE needed. So we could support students by providing a presentation template, by providing the exact task, or by giving choices of PPE and having them select those. Again, content stays the same. We're just removing roadblocks to support our learners to get to that end goal. All right, so these differentiation tips are embedded within the content itself. At the end of every lesson plan, we have a section on the differentiation for the lesson as a whole. Because of course, in addition to those differentiation UDL components in each activity, the lesson itself can also be tailored and modified as teachers see fit, right? So an example for this in this PPE safety lesson, providing a printed out version of the PowerPoint, right? Providing students with the opportunity to verbally create a JHA form, or maybe for your kinesthetic learners who are more hands-on, let's have students actually try on each piece of PPE and reinforce that vocabulary component. Adding visuals, allowing students to choose if they would like to give a verbal presentation or use the computer for their presentation, right? And then offering reading support too. So maybe students are working in pairs. So again, when we went to develop these resources, our goal was really to support our teachers. They are doing the hard work of being, in the classroom and providing them with as many resources, ideas, and materials of here's how you could differentiate this to meet the needs of your kids. At the end of each lesson plan, we have this differentiation, but we have a subcategory for students with more significant learning needs. This might be your students with an IEP or a 504 plan. Again, I want to highlight that all of these are great ideas for all of our learners. So for students with more significant learning needs in this activity, first, we always mention this, but really can't emphasize it enough. Work with your special ed team and teacher, right? Everyone, these are all ideas, and you know your students best. And your special education teacher has such an expertise in this and understands that IEP or 504 plan that we're always going to revert back to, hey, check in and partner, collaborate together. Two other ideas specific to this lesson plan. One is giving picture choices when asking questions, right? The other way to provide visuals specific to this lesson plan is picture cards of the vocabulary words. So these cards might be helpful for students to sort and practice. It would align with our PPE for your body worksheet, which is part of this lesson plan, right? So adding those vocabulary cards to go with it. So again, as we think about how we can incorporate universal design for learning, really our goal was to support our teachers. We're really proud of the work that they're doing. And as we introduce students to construction careers and this CTE space, we want them to see success, and we want our teachers to see success and feel successful in the work that they're doing. All right, and that's it from my presentation.
Thank you, Candace. And thank you to all of our presenters today. Can we give them some emojis and hit your reaction buttons? Love to see those. We do have a couple more questions in our Q&A that we want to make sure we get to. So I think we're gonna bring back Candace, if you have just a minute. We have a question for you. Does your foundation provide training for other CTE pathway instructors who have more industry background versus formal teacher training to support IEP or students who have a 504?
So our team has developed Core Plus Construction, all of the frameworks, and provide the PDs on Core Plus. So we're supporting our teachers with that. But if you're interested in implementing Core Plus Construction at your school, I'll drop my email in the chat. Our focus is Core Plus Construction. So not necessarily all CTE pathways, but we're heads down on Core Plus.
There was another question. Can Core Plus Construction be used at virtual academies, or is it just hands-on?
We don't have that set up because so much of, our program, the heart of our program is this a CTE space. So we certainly have modifications in there if, based on a shop setup and whatnot. But part of our program is completing that industry recognized certificate, which is the skills that students would need to prepare for careers. So we're not an only virtual option.
I'm not seeing other questions in the Q&A just yet. But we did have a couple of questions that we had kind of talked about before the webinar. And so thinking about, Maria, there was a question that you said you get really often that is that what can I do to help students in special education graduate? And do you have an answer that you want to share?
Sorry, did you mean me or Alexandra?
Oh, sorry.
I think we both got that question in tandem.
You guys can both answer it.
Alexandra, please jump in if I'm getting anything wrong, but I would say we do get that question often about how do I get students to the graduation pathways when they have IEPs, because they are expected to meet the same graduation requirements that, again, are in existence for all students for that one diploma. And the thing about it is to think about it the same way that you think about scaffolding and structuring their supports that they receive in class. Do they need some extra check-ins for the pathway that they've selected? Are some of those strategies that Candace just reviewed, are they in place for those students if they're in a CTE class? Does that student know what their accommodations are and how to advocate for themselves when they know that there might be something missing, a tool for them to use that supports them in other ways? Do they need a longer timeline if you're looking at the performance-based pathway option, for instance? I see Alexandra came on camera, so I'm going to pass it on to her.
Yeah, I agree with all those things. I also just wanted to highlight the graduation toolkit has an entire section on framing for supporting have disabilities, as well as the companion FAQ has an entire section on that as well. A couple things that come to mind is, it's a big system shift, shifting from a system that routinely sort of lowered expectations and waived things into one that is supporting all students with high expectations to access like learning standards. And so we're in kind of the shift of that change. And I think one of the things that's difficult, if it's, going back to that ice cream graphic, I won't pull it up, the ice cream, the gen ed scoop and the special ed scoop. If students have had years of no access to the gen ed scoop, that gap between their present level of academic performance and grade level expectations is going to be bigger and bigger for the longer that they haven't had access. And so it's really important to start early in your system with inclusion and rigor and access to those grade level standards. And it can be harder if some of that inclusion and support is starting in high school because you have a bigger amount to kind of like bridge the gap. Some other things that are really, really helpful is making sure, IEPs have that iterative annual cycle that sort of touches base on like, what are your IEP goals? Like, what's your progress in meeting them? What's your graduation plan? And like, what needs to be added or changed in your IEP to help you bridge the gap from where you're at and where you need to be, right? And so those should be things that are embedded in the IEP cycle. And then the IEP team supports the student across environments. It's going to include collaboration with gen ed teachers and school counselors to kind of put that plan together. Probably a much longer answer than you were looking at. The other thing that I'll say that really helps students who have disabilities is early access to career exploration and those sort of course schedule flexibilities that free up some schedule space so students have access to take a class again, maybe if they need to, or have early access to CTE. One of the things that we hear sometimes is that systems don't start the CTE courses until 10th grade. And that doesn't give a lot of time if a student switches gears or maybe needs to take a course again. So just a couple examples that I hope are kind of helpful.
Alexandra. Stanley, one of the questions that you said that you get asked often is about how to transcribe equivalencies. Where do you see people getting stuck, and what advice do you usually give them?
Yeah, so usually one of the big questions that I get is in regard to when does the equivalency credit have to be transcribed? And it's not until the student gets ready to graduate. So it can be transcribed after the student completes the course, but you have up until the student graduates to make any changes. So if a student is taking an agriculture course that has an English equivalency, and upon completing the course, let's say they're in 10th grade, they decide for the credit to all go towards English, that's perfectly fine. Once they become a senior and they're looking at their graduation requirements and find that they need an additional CTE credit, they can go back and decide to change the allocation of that credit from English to CTE.
That's awesome. Thanks, Stanley. And Candace, we talked a little bit for you about adapting lesson plans, and you have so many differentiation tips. Do you have a shorthand way that you remember the different types of differentiation as you're writing these plans, or are you working off of some kind of checklist? I'm just curious how you feel about it.
Yeah, so we really collaborated as a team on this and kind of got in the flow of the lesson plan writing. And my background was in the classroom, and so was our colleague who partnered with us on this. So we really kind of put on our teaching hat and thought, well, how would we differentiate each of these? And as folks who are on this call know, when you have that teaching experience, you can kind of think through, well, what modifications might some students need?
Yeah, it seems like such a great idea to partner with your special education teachers and just to learn some of those go-tos so that differentiation can become kind of a shorthand. Awesome. I think Alexandra, our last question is back to you. You talked a little bit about flexible course offerings, and people often ask you what is available in their schools. How do they find out about that? What advice do you usually provide?
That is a great question. So we have a tip that maybe someone can drop into chat from the slide deck. That is the guidance on comparable content course substitution. Some of the things that I wanted to highlight is basically local decision or like local districts determine what courses need to have comparable content course substitutions and how that they're going to like map those out through kind of unpacking the learning standards and those different levels of complexity. One of the difficult things is oftentimes IEP teams are like making student specific determinations about when a student needs those comparable content for substitutions. So that's the modified depth, breadth, and complexity. But if a system hasn't approached how they teach all students in a way that is conducive to modifying the depth, breadth, and complexity and having students approaching those learning standards at different levels of complexity, it's hard to make those decisions because the courses weren't like designed that way. So it really requires upfront planning as you do your master calendaring, as you support your professional development for all teaching to make sure that like your teaching practices generally have that flexibility built in. The other thing that I'll say is it's really important to look at data. So not just focusing on students with IEPs, but look at like what courses are really hard for students, right? And so maybe you're looking at geometry. You have a lot of students dropping that class or not passing that class or not viewing that as like meaningful. It would be cool to take that information and maybe summer planning and say, hey, how do we make this more interesting, more engaging? Maybe we want to do that construction class. Maybe we have a lot of students in Japanese language who are also struggling with ELA. That graphic novel class could be rigorous and high interest. So using the data you have to kind of think up front and proactively about what kind of course flexibility that you might need and embedding professional development across core content areas on how to provide that flexibility and depth, breadth, and complexity of the standards. So it's really, to kind of bring that long answer all together, it's really important that it's not just IEP teams determining a comparable content course substitution, but it's a system built to design it that way up front.
Yeah, and I love that about universal design for learning, because I feel like you are kind of doing the preventative steps to make it more accessible for more students when you do have options, and you're thinking through what do all the students need and what different mediums can we use. And I love that idea of just the added engagement of thinking about which students need to get this credit the most and how can we reach them and make it more fascinating for them. And I love that. Thank you so much. We are going to go to our next slide, and we're going to talk about the end here. So today's conversation, we know you have lots of CTE questions for Stanley and for our team. Our emails are available, and we also hope that the conversation doesn't end here and that you're thinking about differentiation in your jobs and out there helping students. So talking with your leadership team, your PLC, or even talking to students about things that they think would be interesting helps the conversation move on. We do have some resources here for you. Our Unlocking Federal and State Program Funds document is just updated, so that's brand new, and we want to encourage people to check that out. We also create a newsletter each month that's connected to our webinar theme. So if you want to see articles, if you want to see more information from our presenters, that's in our Engage newsletter. We've included this sample lesson from Candace, and cool to see her differentiation tips that are just integrated into it so flawlessly. So worth checking out as a great example of how to do that work. I've included some websites here. Please check out the graduation toolkit. It has so much great information, and yeah, you can get a lot more there if you need it. OSPI has a special education page. It has a CTE page, and we've included the Core Plus construction site as well. And of course, you can always connect with us at OSPI. And next month, we're going to talk about harassment, intimidation, and bullying, and we'll have some classroom behavior supports for you. And I'm going to launch our poll. Launch. And so we appreciate your feedback. When our webinar closes, you'll see our feedback survey come up. If you want to collect clock hours for watching the video later, you'll also see that in the description, so you can check that out as well. And this topic came out of our evaluation. So this is your words in action. We wouldn't have had this webinar without someone saying, can we talk about this? So thank you for adding your thoughts. And we want to see you get clock hours for joining us. If you joined live, you're already registered for the year through Zoom. You'll also need to register each month in PD Enroller. We create those throughout the year. PD Enroller is going to send you their evaluation. It'll go to your email, and we verify your attendance, and then we release your hours. If you are watching this video later, the process changes a little bit. You're going to register each month for the clock hours in PD Enroller, except for, I'm sorry, if you watch the video later, you do not have to register at PD Enroller. You just take the survey. So the survey is going to prompt us to register for you, and that's how we're kind of changing the process this year. And so that just signals to us that you've watched it once you've taken that survey. And if you have questions about this, Ronnie Larson's awesome. She does our clock hours for us, and her email is included here, so you can reach out to her if you have questions. Thank you again for joining us, and we will see you next month. Thanks, everybody.